Hi there, everyone. Welcome to Unpopular Opinion. It's our very first episode, and oh boy, this is going to be fun. My name is Anthony, or otherwise known AC Allen. You've also seen me on other Kyber Cave productions as Sidorian. Sidorian! Because why? That's a nickname I've come up for myself for a character I wrote in a book I haven't actually published yet. I'm weird.
AC Allen sounds so professional, like with your outfit and your name. I feel like you're the college professor tonight.
Good. I'm trying to look intelligent. This is, of course, Van Gobrian, aka Ark.
Hello there.
Kyber Cave thing because he's the Master Jedi Council member that has put this entire channel forth. So I'm really excited to start this opportunity with you, Van. I'm really happy, especially since our Kyber Cave After Dark seems to have just gone off to the sunset.
Withered away. It had its time. I was really sad that you weren't there for the end. You were doing your production. You were doing your on-stage live production. And what kind of happened, for those of you who may have followed Kyber Cave After Dark, all of our producers, you may or may not have noticed, also work on other shows on our channel. Graveyard works on 2 other shows on our channel, not to mention Distance Nerding and his own podcast for horror. So everybody was kind of getting a little bit burnt out. And Friday, Kyber Cave After Dark was just one more thing. We thought, you know what, let's put this on the back burner. We'll let everybody concentrate on their shows. And when we bring it back, we'll bring it back even better than it was before. But we cannot let you get away, my friend. We needed you back on stage.
What matches it? I was the only one that didn't have 2 other channels. Friday nights was my jam. But no, I'm really excited for this. This is a great way that we can still kind of do the same thing. I think the goal here is to have an open conversation from an outsider observer kind of viewpoint. Everything that is said here within this video is an opinion. Everyone's got opinions. They are all kind of like assholes. They all stink. At the same time, I think it's important that people have rational conversations, especially about big topic items like what we're about to talk about today. And I think it's important that that kind of content makes it onto something like this that does a multitude of things.
We are not here to pick on anybody. We're not here to bash on any idea or lifestyle. But you know what? Sometimes dumbassery does happen. And you need to be called out for it.
Yeah. So that's and it's not picking any political side. It's not taking any side of any extreme. Neutral person right here, neutral person right over there. We are definitely here to just discuss things like adults, because that doesn't seem to happen too often, especially on the internet.
And we want to know your thoughts about this. Please leave a comment down below, whether you agree with us or disagree with us. It's all good. It's all love, man. We're not going to, especially since, we're not here. You can't actually fight us. But, we can have a discussion on air about why you may or may not agree with this, or because I think this is a topic, especially, I'll tell you right now, from a complete outsider point of view, I was sucked in, man. This was some like Days of Our Lives type of shit, dude. Like this was a drama unfolding before my eyes.
Yeah, for being what we're about to talk today is, of course, the Jubilee debate of trans conservatives with trans liberals coming together. It's a video that sparked a lot of controversy, a lot of responses, a lot of responses to the responses, a lot of receipts were involved. And it was important to me that this be something that we do kind of start this off with. Even if we are late to the game, people are still talking about this. Like, I'm still excited to get into the subject matter, because it is steeped into our day-to-day.
I want to say it's been roughly a month since the original taping of this happened, and there are still people putting out videos about responses. Maybe they'll do interviews with some of the people that were up there, but people are still talking about this. There's still a lot of hurt feelings on both sides about some of the discussion that happened. So, and I, as a person who is not of the, transgender community, not of even the underneath the LGBT flag, as a typical cis male, I feel like there was a lot even in there that even affected how I thought about things, or things that I really had never considered before, but it does, in some way affect my life, particularly if I have a daughter or a woman, because, well, you'll see some of the topics that we're going to get into.
Yeah, no, without further ado, I say let's get into it and talk about some nitty gritties here. This is going to be fun. Oh,
let's roll it.
Fun.
It depends. Yes. Yeah, so I think that to start it off though too is it's not necessarily saying that trans women. It all comes down to self-ID. When we moved into a self-ID process, there are a lot of people, there are a lot of men, just simply self-IDing into being trans women to utilize the female restroom and to harm women.
Or just be there.
Yeah. And I actually offer some solutions to this because I believe the free market can handle all of this stuff, because in government-run and government-funded buildings, there should always be a third space for us to use.
I want to comment on Blair's point. The one thing I kept hearing through all of the nuance is passability. Because ultimately, when we talk about passability, it determines how you get harassed in the bathroom. Because honestly, if you don't look so passable or whatnot, people are going to say, oh, that's a man with a dress on, and then there's going to be discourse. But the reality of it is, honestly, who cares who's trans and who's cis going in the bathroom? You should be minding your own business, being able to pee and do your business in peace.
How is it propaganda if it's a thing that really happened? It was caught on video. Like, it was an actual occurrence. It wasn't staged. It happened. And that's not the only, it's not an isolated incident.
But that's not enough for me to say, because actors can do that. Who knows? They could have been an actor trying to make a point against trans people. But this has always been our battle. It's just like, from what I just heard you were saying with your talking points, because I did understand what you were saying. I just got the word passability out of there, and
which I didn't say that word at all.
No, I'm saying that word.
He said passability.
I'm saying
she didn't say it. He did. And the problem, the left.
Okay, I couldn't hear. I just couldn't hear it back there.
The
liberals,
what I was saying was, liberals always use the.
Yeah. No, what I'm saying is, I'm not saying you said that word. What I was getting out of what you were saying, the one word that was coming to me was passability. This is Blossom saying it, and so. Passability politics is really a thing in our trans community, especially when we come to the debate of restrooms.
Oh, okay. Wow. So first of all, can we just address the elephant in the room of there are really about like maybe half of the people that are on this panel that really seem to take a lot of the oxygen in the room. And then there's a few like star moments from everybody. But I really want to talk about everyone that's on this panel. So,
are these people that are? I know a few of them are, I guess, celebrities or well known within the community. Are all of these people known to some degree, or?
So I can tell you from my personal experience. Again, this is my opinion. Someone who I digest a lot of this on here. Blair White is definitely the most recognizable name amongst the panel. Mm-hmm. Certainly amongst the conservatives. It's not to say that Blossom hasn't had plenty of spotlight. She's been on CNN. She's had, I saw a lot more about like the fame of Blossom C. Brown versus any kind of actual information when trying to research her. So she is a trans activist herself. I mean, they both are. The other key members of this panel, though, I will say the one for me that wins this debate each and every single time is Sarah. The one that we heard speak at the beginning, who it is revealed in that video that she is a military veteran. So someone who served her country, someone who obviously comes from a little bit different walk of life. Blair White has a huge platform of multiple millions of people between her many accounts. So definitely this Jubilee production team brought her on first and foremost because it's going to get them views.
Right.
And she's definitely been a big proponent on a lot of the responses, a lot of the fact checks. But guaranteed, Blossom, Alexander, the non-binary, and then I think it's Shane is the other trans man on that panel for the liberals.
Right.
They are the ones that kind of team up on her more so often than not. We even saw just now with Blossom. She quoted that Blair's the one that brought up passability when then gets called out. No, she didn't say that. He did. And then it's
exactly.
Like, well,
and then she said that's what she heard.
Now I'm saying it, but you didn't come into the conversation with a, okay, so the thing I got from that conversation with all of you was passability. you had to call out Blair saying you said this as though that was a point. Now I will
do you
say
think
that,
there's do you think, and you may not know yourself, you not being a transgender person, but is there gatekeeping even within their own community amongst themselves?
well, I can tell you right now, the 2AQ plus LGBT, I don't know what the hell it is anymore, Rainbow Mafia, sadly, has become so conflated with themselves through gatekeeping. And this comes up a lot actually later in this debate about gatekeeping. Now, the interesting thing for me is that what really constitutes the difference between gatekeeping and setting clear boundaries with each other, because I feel like that's the big disconnect that happens a lot here. Even with some of the other people on that panel, I've never seen Sarah before. I've never seen Andrew before. I've never seen, oh God, I'm trying to remember the name now. I had it written down. The other conservative, I think it's Jessica.
I'm terrible with the names.
I'm terrible with names too. This is why I could never remember all the pronouns in the world, because I can barely get your name right to begin with. I
ain't getting Zimmer's name right.
Orders. Hi, Tito's and soda with an extra lime. How are you? Anywho, so I think a big part of this beginning, they're talking about the transgender bathroom bills. And again, I'm not somebody who's trans. However, as someone who is a drag entertainer for about a decade, it would be, I think, reasonably fair for me to say that I express some sort of gender fluidity, right? And I usually use this as kind of my own catch-22 with people when they want to argue with me about my cisgenderness and all that as being the reason to why I'm wrong. I could claim those things as a way to co-opt it and say, oh, hey, I have the right to express this because I dressed as a girl for so long when I felt like it. At the same time, I was very unabashed about in my drag self of, I'm a man in a wig and a dress that does this for my own self-enjoyment and for that of others. So I did it as to be an entertainer. It was a persona of myself. It was not who I am deep within. That's not to say I've never considered it or never went down that own rabbit hole. I actively believe that if I would have been born today in this kind of climate, exactly the same way that I was growing up, being a very queer 5-year-old kid, they would have convinced me that I was trans, 100%.
Right. You know, it's amazing to me, and I do realize, I can't remember, SDM, the book, I know we're up to like 5 now. And, you know, when we were growing up, they were on 4, edition number 4. But it is amazing to me how many things nowadays are just the norm and acceptable that was considered, you know, a disease or something abnormal just 20 years ago, or not even 20 years ago. 30, you know.
Well, again, a lot of this ultimately boils down to understanding one another. So in this first clip, they're talking about the bathroom bill, which, to Blossom's point, actually, she does make the good point. You know, for the most part, people are just going in there to pee. And I do think that there is something important in that aspect. I've always looked at this and gone, you know, I don't get it. I've gone into bathrooms plenty of times in full drag into a women's restroom, like to fix my makeup, because I feel like I'm less threatening in that zone, or I'm not going to be threatened as much. At the same time, I'm not hanging out there. And I'm not doing so in a creepy manner. Blair is actively pointing to a video, which I should have had us get that clip because I saw it recently. And I was like, dear God, really? And it's a person who's identifying as a woman with like a full-on erection in a pair of jeggings that's just like hanging out in the restroom. They're not in the stall. They're not washing their hands. They're actively standing there on their phone, like doing something. And this is the problem. When we don't set boundaries, when we don't have a better understanding, and when we don't have some sort of barrier to people, there's going to be those that take advantage of it. So I think even to the point of passability, there's a lot of trans people, especially Blair White talks about this. There's another one, a British commentator, I think her name's Rose Dawn, that talked about a lot of this, where there is this 50-50 that kind of needs to happen. if you want people to treat you in a way, shape, or form to how you feel about yourself, you need to do the effort to present that if you want it reciprocated from them, without pushing them to do so.
Right.
One of my biggest pet peeves, actually, even in drag, was how many people would come up to me on a regular basis to say, "Hey, what are your pronouns?" Because honestly, I don't care. I absolutely do not give a fuck.
Right.
And my big proponent is that people really shouldn't either.
I have a really quick thought. I feel like all of this shit could be squashed easily with one easy change of mind.
Yes.
It doesn't matter to me how you identify. If you identify as a male or female or however you identify, I think the root problem in society goes back to us having to define what a man is or what a woman is. Meaning, if I could accept that a man may occasionally want to wear a dress, or a man may occasionally want to do a job that is traditionally a woman-run type of job, or that a woman could be a tomboy. If I could just accept these things instead of defining what a woman should do or what a man should do or what a man should be, then we wouldn't have any of these problems. Any of them. All of them would be gone.
I think that this is actually better saved to discuss at a later clip when we get to the non-binary part, honestly.
Let's run to the next one. Let's see what we got on this next one. You ready?
Yes.
All right, here we go.
A lot of different points from everybody here. Honestly, like I can understand like how some women may feel unsafe with men in the restroom. Men. When I say men, I mean men. I'm not talking about trans women. So being a non-binary person that sometimes has the choice to either go into a men's restroom looking like this. You can look at me looking like this.
It's just interesting that I thought this was a trans debate. That's what I
don't
thought.
even.
Non-binary people
Non-binary people
will
fall
fall
under
the
trans
trans
umbrella.
No, they don't.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe you could educate yourself a little bit on that.
I think I
and
could
maybe
educate
then you would figure out.
I think I could educate
you know what the reality is.
I'm
and what
sure there's
trans
a
actually means.
non-binary Jubilee episode.
Wow,
Well, because it's not a debate about who is really trans and who is not.
It can be.
We're talking about restrooms. As a trans non-binary person, when I go into a place that only has men's and women's restrooms, and I'm dressed like this, my choice to go into the men's restroom at that point puts me in danger.
6 years ago, when I've transitioned almost 8 years ago, but 6 years ago, it was never an issue for me to use the women's room. Girls would literally drag me in there with them and say, "Girl, you need to be in our bathroom." And I was like, I felt uncomfortable back then. I don't pass. I know I don't pass, so that's a me problem. And I'm not gonna turn my fear of being attacked in the men's room into a woman's problem. It's still a me problem, so I need to work on myself. And it sucks. Does it suck? Yes, it sucks. I don't pass. I know I don't pass. But I still respect women enough, and some trans people aren't capable of handling themselves against a man, but I am confident in my ability to do that. And not everybody can, I get that. But it's just now, 6 years ago, I used to use the women's room. Now I don't, because women have spoke out. They've come out and said, we're not comfortable. There's too many self-ID'd people out there just taking advantage. And I choose to use the men's room to protect them.
I can definitely actually almost empathize with a lot of trans women and their experience in the bathroom and a lot of the turmoil with going in and, especially with passability. But the layer that I feel like in the conversation that's missing here is actually trans men. And also the fact that I was born biologically female, and a lot of the things that trans women experience of violence in the bathroom is what I experienced as a child. So the reason why my education here is not necessarily to create an idea that I need to conform to Eurocentric standards. Myself, I'm a 6 foot tall trans man, size 13 shoe, so I don't fit into the Eurocentric standards of what a woman is, and I never did as a child. I was bullied relentlessly for this and isolated from many spaces. So this discussion about trans women being in the restroom also affects biological women, because guess what?
Here's the middle ground. Y'all ready? We're gonna be so happy with this. This is the middle ground. We all actually agree. It's men that are the problem. Yep. It's not trans women, real trans women. However, The problem is our community has really eroded any barriers to actually being trans, in the sense of your average cross-dresser can identify as a trans woman.
But then it's not a trans woman.
Well, I'm glad you feel that way. I feel that way as well. I agree with you wholeheartedly. However, with the state of the political correctness within the trans community, you can't really say that. Like, that person
is this person saying
and
they're
their
a
self-ID.
cross-dresser?
No, they say that they're trans, but they're a cross-dresser.
I actually do agree with you, Blair, 100%.
Okay, so fun enough. Blair summed it up right there perfectly, everything that I would have to say on that in subject matter.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is that Blossom even says, I 100% agree. Now, I do want to talk about two characters in particular that we see, well, excuse me, three. Again, I was correct. It was Jessica. I love Jessica. I feel so bad for Jessica in this state of this argument over here, because this is the person that all of this new conflict actually hurts.
Right.
This is the person who clearly has been transitioning for a while, has been welcomed into the space by women saying, no, you belong with us. You need to be here. And she feels that because she's not passable enough, that now I have to go to the men's room because of the people who are the immediate problem, the people who self-ID, who take advantage of the situation, because our political correct state that we live in right now can't call anything out. There's no border lines, there's no boundaries, there's no, and again, once you do that, oh, now you're gatekeeping. So, but it is interesting that the talking point is about trans women going into women's spaces. And then Shane brings up the whole, well, you know, what we're missing here is the trans men.
Right.
And that's a fair point, but let me also say this right here and now. Trans men have a much less difficult time passing than trans women ever will, because at the end of the day, no matter what, every single man on that panel, all of those trans men, you would not look twice at once going into a men's restroom.
And not to say that trans women specifically are the problem, but I think a lot of times when you see a lot of society fighting back against the trans community, it is typically the trans women. The trans men going into the men's room, women,
it's a non-issue.
men, right? It's a non-issue, but trans women going into the women's room, the women in there feel more threatened. Women are obviously more threatened by a man than a man would be by what is, you know, perceived to be a woman. So I can understand. That's why I feel bad for Jessica, like you were saying, is that her saying that she knows that she's not passable, and that she feels that she needs to go to the men's room because of what women have said as a society.
As far as another big talking point, though, with kind of similar to that school situation, there was one recently at a college about a sorority that had to let in a self-identifying trans woman, and they basically told all of the members of the house, you don't get to have an opinion about this. You have to accept it in the sake of trying to be progressive. And then this person just acted like a fucking creep. You know, right. Asking very personal questions about their body parts, hiding erections underneath pillows while they like stare at them on a couch. This kind of behavior should not be acceptable, and it should be called out, saying, hi, you clearly are not a trans person, because you wouldn't be doing this if you were. You wouldn't be conducting yourself in this way if you were. Exactly. So the statement's still true that the issue is not trans women. The issue is men taking advantage of
creepy dudes
language of what's called trans, or how we define a woman, like you were saying. Even with Alexander, though, can I please just talk about this boy? I'm sorry. Alexander, to me, is the most controversial person on this panel, and not just because of do we consider non-binary to be considered trans.
That's what I was kind of wondering, is what he was doing on this. This didn't really seem like discussion place for, I mean, not that his important
well, no. Let me just point this out right here now. So everyone else on this panel is wearing what they would wear to like the store or to like yoga or
Their
around
everyday
the
life.
house. It's everyday clothing. Alexander decides to come looking like a watered down version of Sasha Velour from Drag Race with the bald head and the hat that looks like a rolled up condom, which apparently is like the signature look, because I've seen at least a couple of now where it's the same hat but in a different color, same outfit but a different color. This comes up later, but it comes off very much as drag and a costume. And this is the difference between, and again, Andrew's going to get to this point later in this video, and it's amazing. That's not something real trans people can take off. That's something he absolutely can take off.
Exactly.
And Alexander even does the whole, oh, you can look at me. It's that attitude right there that irritates me the most. Yes, of course we can look at you. Clearly, you want us to. If you didn't, you wouldn't look like a fucking clown right now.
It was that eyeshadow for me.
Professional. No, and that's just it. There's so many trans individuals under the non-binary thing. Jeffrey Marsh is another one. I just look at, you're a man with a full-on 5 o'clock shadow with bad makeup on, and you expect to be treated like you're this like magical fairy princess. Kindly fuck off, because seriously, Alexander, I do better drag than you. I would actually look more like a girl going into a girl's restroom than you do. You know why? Because I shaved when I dressed up with my makeup. I wore a pair of tits so that it could be like, people can play with like the whole non-binary thing. Oh, it's gender play. It's in between. But my least favorite statement is when they say, oh, I'm neither but both. Because that to me is such an oxymoron. Again, I dress up with girls' clothes all the time. I had a collection of gowns and shoes and wigs and lashes and all that stuff. I did those things to feel beautiful. And I think there's nothing wrong if someone's wanting to do it to feel beautiful, but you also have to own it with the mentality of be badass. So walk up into the men's room to take a piss wearing that, Alexander, and then if somebody gives you shit, be like, and what? You know how
what's going to happen with a lot of these people when the pendulum swings the other way. For those of you that have ever studied history at all, or even care to look back, it seems like every 10 to 20 years, the culture shifts from liberal to conservative, very liberal to very conservative. If you look back 20 years, you know, right after 9/11 and everything, this country got locked down under the Bush administration. We had the NSA was monitoring everybody's phone calls and everything. Very conservative place to be. And now we've just swung completely, in the opposite direction. And now people are starting to fight back.
At the same time, I would say to the trans activists of the world, I hope that they can self-reflect to some extent. That the problem with demanding something outright, without putting any work in, without transitioning, without really doing any of the effort to portray yourself outside of clothing or makeup, you really take away that win from the trans people that came before you, who earned that on their own. Because can you imagine the elation that, say, like a young trans woman or man gets the first time that a random person says, "Hi there, ma'am, how are you doing today?" That's gotta feel incredible. That has to feel incredible. And I don't think it's okay to take that win away from them by saying, "Hi, I as a non-binary person demand that you as a stranger talk to me in this certain way." Because even when they do, even there's been times recently too where people get upset because someone figured out that they fell into something else and address them as that without them telling them, and now they're upset about that. So pick in another clip. I think it's time.
Yeah, we got like 7 more clips. So we got. All right, let's get into the next.
Have fun editing.
Concern the safety of trans people, and I do agree that something does need to be done about that to protect us. Who's protecting us in the military? Who is?
I mean, if you're even diagnosed with like mild social anxiety, you're not eligible to enter the military. If you have like a crooked left, pinky toe, you're not eligible. So discriminatory, I mean, that word sounds pretty in today's climate, very much like, oh no, discrimination, but it's not always bad. Sometimes it's for the safety, and it's like, when it comes to the military and when it comes to keeping America safe, that has priority over anyone's feelings being hurt.
Discrimination is discrimination, and I don't think there's
not always a
any other
negative
way
thing, though.
around it.
Well,
It's
when-
still
when you say
discrimination.
That doesn't mean it's
protect
negative, though.
Our troops over there, while they're over there, you're talking about, or protect them before so they can get in.
Both. It is important to protect all trans people in the military.
Well, we can't waste
And so what if the
resources
best way to protect them
protecting
is not putting them in the Middle East with Muslims that are going to kill them?
Well, I just want to interject your point about suicide. So as somebody who has worked in community service with community members directly, a lot of their suicide issues actually revolve around access to finances. And the military is one of the highest employers of transgender people. So we actually see the suicide rate drop. And for me
That's a good
personally,
point, but it's one of the highest employers of anybody.
But if you're suicidal and you go into a job that has a high likelihood of PTSD, causing PTSD and all these other issues, then it becomes a big issue because then you already have one mental illness, and then you're compounding it with more.
And when you're on, a very strict regimen of, if you're trans and if you're really trans, and we can get into who's really trans later because I'm going to have a lot to say about that, but if you're going to be on hormones, right, you're not always going to have access to those drugs when you're deployed and when you're in those situations. That's why I say if you're, a line cook or something, if you're whatever, that's one thing. But if we're talking about combat, you're not exactly going to have access to your testosterone blockers and your estrogen.
How do you know that? Because medical
they
care
don't have
is
those kind of
covered
pharmacies in the Middle East.
Medical care is covered in the military, so they should have access to that. So that is false information.
and also you guys are forgetting
Right,
the fact, well,
but-
hold on. You guys have all forgotten the fact of what is the flip side for these transgender individuals that are signing up for the military and they're taken out, and that was their life plan. Where are they supposed to work and where is their employment supposed to be?
No, I
Because the
agree,
mental
but-
illness that
I
happens
agree, it's
through
horrible.
homelessness and the lack of resources
agree,
that
it's
come.
horrible.
So that is also
They
the flip
actually-
side of that. So if folks
but they
don't
didn't
have,
kick
hold
anybody
on
out.
1 second, but if they don't have access to a job that could offer them support.
Oh damn. Okay.
That's a tough one.
So here's the deal. On this subject matter, of course, they changed over. Again, the one person on this entire panel was Sarah, who actually actively served in the military. That should have been the sounding board 100% during that topic matter.
Right.
What's interesting is that throughout a lot of this whole debate, Blossom is a type of individual that seems to talk as though she has a point, but doesn't seem to really have a point. And Shane is a person that constantly projects his personal upbringing as a rationale as to why we should all let people do this. So when it comes to the transgender military ban, Sarah does talk a bit more later on in the segment about that it's not so much of a ban against people being transitioned at all, but it does take into the account that if you have a type of surgery, you have like a whole segment of time in which you are now out of commission because you're in recovery. Even she brings up the point of like, you're going to say that, oh, well, we need to let trans people be in the military because of suicides rates over not having access to jobs or any kind of financial stability. But we also are now disregarding entirely the high likeliness of a PTSD in the military also leading to suicide. So it's compounding one thing with another. My take on this is that if you are only entering the military to have access to medical coverage so that you can transition, and that's your only goal behind of it, you have no business being in the military. If you are a transgender individual who wants to fight for the country because you want to protect the freedoms of others like you, that's the right answer to be in the military. At the same time, regardless on how you feel, you still have to pass a series of like vetting types of things. They have to diagnose you with any other medical issues you might have. You have to go through rigorous physical training. You have to go through some sort of conditioning that if you have anxiety around crowds, then the military might not be for you. If you have a series of other mental issues or depression or a multitude of other medical conditions, which I'm going to tell you right now, I sad to say, I've met so many people in my life who are trans that they all have confided in me that they've either been sexually assaulted at some point in their childhood or later in life, that they suffer from depression, from anxiety, that they have all of this whole litany of things that are constantly an issue for them, that I have to ask, why is this so consistent with gender identity, and how potentially the climate of the culture is trying to say like that's the quick fix of it. Like, oh, change your gender, suddenly you'll be happy with yourself. But when ultimately you should try to be happy with yourself first and foremost. That has to come from within to begin with. If you have trauma of any kind or sort or form,
that's got to be dealt with.
And well, yeah, that has to be dealt with. I mean, mental health in general is a huge issue, and especially going into something like combat, like the military, that's a very damaging thing for the psyche, to get into a situation where you might have to take a life of somebody. And to Blair's point, like, look, if somebody's in the military and they want to transition, if you're in an innocuous role of like a line cook or something that provides to the military, still gets the same kind of check and benefits and all that other stuff, but isn't necessarily put on the front line of things, you know, that's fine. But if you actively are just trying to become a member of the Army or a Marine, so you can get the benefits and access to hormones, you might be in it for the wrong reasons.
It doesn't hurt anything. Who
2
really
seconds.
cares?
I'm sorry. We'll cut here real quick. My husband's calling me.
Oh.
Hello.
All right. So we got a few more clips here. Everybody in the audience, I've got.
Oh, you do? Okay, cool.
One more on this, and then 2 more topics with a couple. This is Unpopular Opinion. My name is Ark. That is AC Allen. And it looks like he is off the phone, so I will put him off mute. I forgot I could just mute your ass. I was just kind of updating people that may have just jumped in and are just trying to, while you were doing your thing.
You do realize that we're not live, right?
Oh, yeah. Cut that shit, Bezzo.
I was like, dude, I wouldn't do this if we had people watching us right now.
That's hella funny, dude. No, you want to get into the next clip? All righty, let's just get into the next. All right, man. So we're getting into the next clip. All right, that was 3A. This should be 3B. All right.
Research and access to medication, access to benefits, lifetime benefits. That's something that most transgender people in any sector of any job.
So do you want an answer to your question, or are you just going to round? Because I can answer. You said, what about those people that were kicked out? I actually think it's bad if you are someone who was in it and you really are, because just like, you know, Sarah, and I've met many trans veterans that I've paid respect to publicly on social media, and I think that's amazing, actually. So if you're kicked out and it was once, you know, the norm,
what's the resources you're
I'm
offering
speaking
them,
though. If you're kicked out and it once was the norm for you to participate in the military, that's sad. But at the same time, if that is what is determined for the ultimate safety and effectiveness of the military, nothing should come before that.
Blair, have you ever worked directly with trans people?
Because the second bomb.
Have you ever worked directly?
I am right now.
No,
We're
directly
surrounded by
in
them.
services in terms of nonprofits and actually getting clientele.
She's not
That's
grassroots.
my entire career.
She is not a grassroots person because, truth be told, a lot of our community is in grassroots.
Have you ever had a client list of transgender people that you actually took care of?
Hold on just a second.
Took care of them, like paid their bills? No, I don't.
Offering them services, getting them through services.
I've helped a lot of trans people in my life.
Trans-led organizations that are ran by trans people. I really want to see what you've done for those organizations, because I don't see any of y'all on the front line. Physically doing. That is the point.
Have you ever taken on a client load? Have you ever had someone come to you homeless and give them resources?
I'm sure you guys feel very.
You
guys are asking questions and you have no interest in the answer. I'm sure you guys are very, very proud of the
fact
fact that you can walk
in circles, Blair. That's what we're saying.
How could it be a circle when I haven't answered the question at all because you keep speaking? I'm sure you guys are very proud that you can enter a building and work with 25
able to do that. Maybe people who aren't. And I feel like that will be determined without just a ban across the board. And yeah.
So it wasn't actually a full ban, though. That's what people don't realize, okay? So
you can still enlist.
Nobody got kicked out of the military. They didn't kick a single person out of the military who came forward and had gender dysphoria. 2, it was actually easy. It's more open to serve under the ban than it was under Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Yeah.
Okay? So you could actually be a trans person and present however you wanted off duty. You could go to a ball in a dress and nobody cared, and they couldn't kick you out. And serving in the military, it's not a right. They can disqualify you for any reason, physical, anything. People get kicked out all the time because they can't pass PT tests.
Right.
And overseas.
So again, Sarah right here, as a person who actually has experience in the military as a trans person, said it very eloquently that there's a lot of misconception about the concept of a ban. The word ban obviously makes us think like, oh, it's discrimination. To Blair's point earlier, it was like, some discrimination is good. Like what I was trying to say to my point, we need to have this understanding that there's a difference between boundaries and vetting people versus discrimination out of the need for hatred or misunderstanding. Again, if you're someone who's entering the military as a profession and you are capable of doing the job to what is required of you, then there should be no reason whatsoever you can't do it living your authentic self, because men and women and trans people and gay people can all serve in the military to protect our country.
Right.
And even to Sarah's point again, things right now under this ban are still better than what they were during Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which I remember in my childhood being the thing that kind of got repealed.
Okay, let me ask you this, just for because if I'm asking the question, there's probably other people that might have the same question. Just for clarity of understanding, a transgender person is a person who has done something either with hormones or pills to try to change their physical body, correct? Whereas like you can be a cross-dresser, but a cross-dresser isn't necessarily transgender.
Correct. So this is the way that I would best put it, and the best way that I have always understood it growing up. I've always felt that the best argument for transgenderism is that you are a woman born in the man of a body, or you are a man born in the body of a woman. You know, innately, fundamentally, something is off that's not resonating well. And until my outer shell of a person it has expressed that people can see me as that, I'm not going to feel okay with who I am. Modern day transgenderism, unfortunately, does not seem to have a comprehensive understanding of that. Again, it comes down to a lot of feelings and a lot of
So it's just how you feel. It doesn't actively have to do it. You don't actively have to do anything about it.
Well,
it's
and
just
that's
how
just
you
it.
feel.
A lot of them don't, and that's where the non-binary thing, like coming out as trans, kind of to me is just disingenuous.
I think you got to make the commitment, man.
Well, no, I'm not trying to say that non-binary people don't exist. That comes up later in this debate too. It's not that non-binary people don't exist. It's that there should be no reason in classifying them as a separate type of identity than that of a trans person. It's the same way that there's a very different relationship between gay men with gay men versus lesbian women with lesbian women versus heterosexual men and women.
There are far less debilitating things that will disqualify you from access to the military than trans. And if you want to put it on a scale, trans is one of those things that for a lot of people is quite debilitating, whether it's mentally, physically, whatever. If you have, social anxiety, if you have depression, any of these things that are less mentally taxing than gender dysphoria, all those things, then why is it that we should have like a go around because we're trans? I go with what the generals say. I go with what the people at the top say. This is what is the most effective way to have our military.
Just not General Milley.
I just really hope that the people at the top.
No, not him. You know what I mean? It levels to that too.
I just really hope that the people at the top that you're referring to aren't transphobic, because let's be clear of the isms that are in the military.
Man, we live in America. People are allowed to be.
Excuse me, I'm speaking. Do not interrupt a black trans woman when she's speaking.
You've interrupted me hella times.
When it comes to isms.
Did the interrupter just say use her skin tone to say you couldn't interrupt her?
If you are black and
That's
trans
amazing.
and you want to go into the military, I am quite sure that my experience would not look the same as y'all's. And if we can't wake that up, then we're really being complicit.
They don't look at your race.
I don't think your skin tone makes any difference.
Well, yes, it does.
As somebody who's serving in the military,
for you to tell a black person that is so problematic, for you to tell a person of color here, because I am, this is my experience and this is my reality. First of all, that is so disrespectful to tell a person of color, a black person, how they should feel. How dare you sit up here and say no?
Again, the culture of the military. This is a debate that we have as civilians that the military doesn't have. okay? Just plain and simple. If you can do your job, nobody cares who you are, what you do, what your extracurricular activities outside of the military are. All they care is that they can count on the person to the left and right of them. And again, like I said before, in the very beginning, if you can't deploy and you can't go do your job, then there's really not a big reason for you to be there. Like I said before, you just couldn't go actually take hormones and transition while you were in. And it was a lot different because I served in 2010 to 2011 before Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed. So I know what it was like before that as well.
And I totally agree with what you're saying. So there's some middle ground.
There's some middle ground there. Let's go, people.
Group hug.
Schools should include trans conversation in sex ed.
To the point of what we just saw, though, again, we had Sarah from someone as an experienced veteran speaking her point. You know, had to have said, like I said before, like I said before, like I said before, so many times because people were not listening to her. At the same time, again, this is where I have an issue with someone like Blossom and why I feel like she's, at the end of the day, like a very problematic viewpoint within the community. It was the, you know, as a Black trans woman, you will hear her say that verbatim over and over as like that's the point of validation and that's the only one that matters.
Exactly. And I feel like it's a way of shutting down other people.
It does.
Like I am more of a minority than you are. Therefore, my opinion is more valid than your opinion is.
It doesn't matter if what I say makes sense. It's the fact that my skin color and my exclusivity within the community and how marginalized I am, I get to have a louder voice, and you're not allowed to disagree with it. I really have a big problem here that so much of the community has been taken up by this mindset of my skin color and my gender identity trumps yours if it's not the same as mine. I feel like ultimately that's the same viewpoint that racist people have. If I were to come into an argument and say, well, as a white man in America, you need to listen to me more, that would be absolutely, completely abhorrently wrong, correct?
Oh, you would get shut down by just about everybody.
So quickly. So I don't feel that it's necessary for people to say something like that. You cannot use your Blackness or your transness as a shield from any and all criticism about what you're saying.
Right.
So that's where she really kind of fails in this whole argument. And again, Blair even called her out too. You've been interrupting me this entire time. She has no problem interrupting other people, shutting them down, talking over them. But don't you dare say it to her. Don't you dare, because now you're the bigot. You have to treat people the way that you want to be treated. So if you're going to treat them like that and then get pissed off because they did the same thing to you, then you're not really setting a precedent of what you want. You're just saying that I'm better than you and you should listen to me. But it is interesting that a lot of them were very quickly able to kind of like attack Blair on her viability as being a voice within the community, even though she has 2.1 million followers, you know, between her social media, versus them saying, well, I'm grassroots. I talk to like 25 people a month.
I don't think any minor should be having life-altering elective surgery or life-altering elective medicalization, period. And so when I work on bills across the country that do ban this for minors, there's a couple things I point out. I point out that I don't think a 16-year-old female who wants breast implants should be able to get that either. When we look at what we allow minors to do, like surgeries and stuff like that, they're not life-saving. They're not, if you don't get it, you're not going to die. It's not like getting, like having appendicitis and having to get your appendix removed or anything like that. It's elective. I think that's the key point here.
Agreed. My thing about surgery, that I agree with to an extent.
This is definitely the prompt that I am the most passionate about, because I think there are few things more vile, more irresponsible, more dangerous than saying a child can consent to permanently removing a body part that serves an extremely important function. Detransitioners all over the country can never breastfeed their children if they can even have them, because if they did other things, that can stop them from having kids at all, right? The idea that a child can consent to a sex change, to gender affirming surgery, if you believe that, there's really nothing that you can believe they can't consent to, right? Because that's pretty extreme. That's a permanent body modification under the best circumstances. So you want to move aside all the complications, all the things you can't do, the sterilization, not being able to feed your kids. You can even set that aside. Just the permanent body modification, I mean, you have to be so demented to believe that a child fully understands. I heard a few conversations about, well, if the child fully understands, they don't.
Right.
Yeah. So again, this is another part where I really do feel that Sarah ultimately wins this debate single-handedly, regardless of the lack of social media presence or fame like Blair has. But they are both pretty consistent that, minors should not be given these treatments or surgeries or being told that they should or push for it. No one's saying that an adult can't make their own decisions, but it's kind of the same extent. I have a lot of tattoos. I paid good money for these tattoos, but I also got them after the age of 18.
Right.
There's not a lot of places that will allow something like that to happen without parental consent. Even when I was in for my last session, there was a call about, okay, can I bring my granddaughter in to get a piercing? She's only I think 14 or 16, they said in the call. And they said, okay, so here's the deal. In order to do that, we need a birth certificate. We either need a parent or the legal guardian with verification that that's who you are present to sign off saying that this is gonna be okay and that we can do this. This is for a piercing. And the woman on the phone was kind of oh, really? I have to do all that? And it's yeah, because this is body modification of some sort, and you can't just bring in a kid, say I'm the grandma, and then think that we're going to go, okay, yeah, let's go ahead and pierce your nose for you. That's just not the way the world works. Right. And even looking up online with the Human Rights Campaign, which was very clearly a liberal written thing, where they're trying to say that puberty blockers have no side effects that are long or long term, nothing long lasting, to completely reversible. They've been used for decades. Most of the times that puberty blockers have been used in the past decades are for what's called precocious puberty. And what that is that it's people who, men and women, or boys and girls, that start developing at a very young age, and specifically under the age of 10. So when you have a young girl at the age of 8, having menstruation or developing breasts, or a young boy suddenly having a growth spurt at the age of 9, it does call in medical intervention to, hey, let's slow this down because it's a little fast acting and you're not quite mentally there to start being treated as such or understanding those things. I will say that the precocious puberty only affects 1 in 5 to 10,000 people. So it's a very, 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 very small margin in which someone's going to need to take that actively for the right reasons. When I hear trans activists talk about, well, puberty blockers are a good thing because we don't want them to have to go through an awkward puberty. I'm sorry, did you think that this was enjoyable for any of us? There's a lot
it's
of
pretty much awkward for everybody.
Well, it is. And again, there's a lot of projection here, especially in the statistics of where they're coming from with trans individuals, that they believe that if they would have been able to transition younger, that somehow their life would have been easier or better or more fulfilling from a post-tense stance. And I don't think that there's anyone to say that if you have a child that from the age of 5 and on was like, no, I shouldn't be a boy, I feel like a girl, or vice versa, that you don't actively teach parents like, hey, if your kids are adamant about that, really pay attention, listen to them, and then ask them, why do you feel that way? You don't have to push them in any way, shape, or form. And I think there's nothing wrong with socially transitioning young adults and teenagers if that's how we want to really proactively go about this.
Right.
If you have a young boy that when he's reaching puberty, he's like, this is so just not me, and they're having that gender dysphoria being a very serious mental condition as to why we can actually validate transgenderism as a whole. There's a science behind that. When you're the brain of a girl developing, but you have the body of a man, there's science behind that backs it up. There's nothing that should tell me that kid shouldn't be allowed to put on dresses or grow their hair out or start wearing makeup if that's what makes them feel comfortable.
Right. And like I said, if we just accepted people for who they were, that men could want to wear, dresses, or girls could love swords. If we just accepted things for what they are, then we wouldn't have a lot of these problems. People would just be who they were.
And that's the erosion that should happen. And that's what it was when I was a kid, is that you just take away, like, just because you're a boy doesn't mean you have to play football or play basketball or be rough or have facial hair. You don't have to do all of these things to be the man. You don't have to suppress your emotions. There's a lot to be said about with being a man in general, that the social expectations of us to be emotionally detached, constantly the hard worker, provider. We have to do all of the shitty jobs and then be told like, oh, well, you're still the problem as to why everyone else is oppressed. It really does take away at the end of the day, like, what it is to be a man with those expectations and feel like you can't fulfill them.
Let's get into these last set of clips here. This is we're probably going to be running about 2 hours. I think in future shows, the show's going to be roughly an hour, maybe a little bit more each. But this is such a good and fun topic.
To edit a lot of this out, so it doesn't matter. She can make it 35 minutes, and we will be none the wiser.
All right.
It's okay for minors to get top surgery.
Really?
You guys waited on that?
That's pretty vile.
I feel like the vibe is like, I like, as someone who had top surgery and went on hormones, like, it's a very emotionally intense experience. I think in terms of like minors getting surgery, like, the reason why I'm not like no to that is because I feel like maybe someone's like 17 or something. I honestly feel like it is a really intense surgery, but I feel like if somebody's like 17 or like late 16 and like feels like it's right for them, I mean, like, people are really different. I know for me, like, top surgery when I was like 16 would have been like so good, and it would have literally like saved my spinal cord from like binding all the time. That's why I'm like, yeah, like, I feel like in instances like it can make sense.
I agree with a caveat that there does need to be some sort of process, which there is, by the way, in place.
Yes, absolutely.
Sometimes there's a slip through. Yes, things happen because, again, as I said earlier, this is a big world. But to, again, negate people the ability to walk through a door that you have walked through, I'm going to say this again, and then close it behind you, is a little bit of a slap in the face for anybody who's seeking transition.
Yeah.
And as somebody who has experienced top surgery and also waited quite a bit of time, a lot of severe damage actually was created to my rib cage that my wife, who is half my size, actually has the same size rib cage in the back as mine. And these are permanent damage to my body because I binded for about 8 years, and there's even still issues that I have with breathing and certain issues that I face that, unfortunately, if I had that surgery a lot earlier, I would have a better posture. I'd have a lot of pain that is not within my body that I have to deal with on a daily basis, while simultaneously the idea that, I get maybe under 16 top surgery would be something that would possibly even make me a little uncomfortable. But I also know that I was homeless at 16, paying my own rent, and left my home at 16 and had to live my life as an adult very early. So I was able to make those decisions for myself, but I think it's weird that others can't seem to see that I could make a medical decision for myself when I had to physically take care of myself. And I look at some of these younger kids, and there's a sense of jealousy there and excitement for them at the same time, because they now have access to memories and being in the space and being in a comfortable body that, you know, I had a lot of isolation growing up in my childhood because I didn't feel comfortable to present in a female space or a male space. I was isolated constantly from school, from the outside world, from my family. And my transition, my top surgery has done nothing but take physical pain off my body, especially with as large chested as I was and having to bind for as many years as I did.
So to this, I'm going to say that Shane, throughout this entire debate, tends to project a lot about, and don't get me wrong, speaking from experience is obviously a way that people get a lot of things across. I've done it here in this video today. At the same time, I have to say that a lot of what Shane does throughout it consistently is to be like, well, I came from this completely broken household. I had to live on my own at 16.
Right.
I had to do
Not
this.
everybody's in that situation.
Yeah, I bound myself. Like when he says that he binded for 8 years, I find that fascinating because I'm almost certain from watching this debate a few times now that he also says that he got access to medical coverage to get top surgery at the age of 16 while being homeless. Mind you, same person that during the the military argument, we need people to have access to the military so they can get medical coverage, which you can only get at the age of 18. But then later on, you say that you got medical treatment for surgery at the age of 16 while being homeless, and saying that you also binded yourself for 8 years.
Something's a little off.
Well, no, I feel like a lot of Shane's timeline might be one of these precocious puberties that we talked about. This absolutely was someone that should have had puberty blockers administered at a younger age. If you're developing at a rate that you have a very large chest from the age of 8 and you are 6 foot tall and a 13 size foot naturally as a biological woman, I mean, I think that you might be in extreme circumstance, sir.
Right.
And then,
but on the other thing too is I know when I was teaching, when I was a preschool teacher, I remember this was a good 8 to 10 years ago. I remember reading stories about how a lot of children were developing a lot faster, like 8-year-old, 9-year-old girls were starting to develop breasts. And it was because of hormones that were in the foods that they were eating. So, because the cows were injected with a lot of hormones, and now these children are growing up on eating steaks and, nice carne asada tortillas. They're getting a lot of these hormones. And that's why, you see a lot of boys with breasts, essentially, because they're being fed a lot of estrogen through these meat products that they're eating.
Well, I know a lot of estrogen can be built from eating a lot of soy products in particular. So you see a lot of that coming from that as well. Again, I do feel like you're correct in the statement that we did see a lot of that growing up because of the hormones being put into our foods to create more bulk for that. And now we're seeing the after effects of what that does to us as a society and our children.
Right.
I don't think it's okay ultimately to let children make the call about themselves when they don't have that autonomy in any other way, shape, or form in society. We don't allow somebody to drive before the age of 16. So why should they be able to elect for surgery? If this is something you really, really need for your self-image, for yourself to be okay with yourself, you can do it when you turn 18. And if you really actively have this thing about where like, no, I need it now, like that's when it's like, take all your savings, go get a job, work hard and make that money happen. So the second you can legally do so, you can get that done. Then you'll know, but you need to take the time to understand yourself. You can't do it because, oh, well, all of the really popular people on social media have been getting double mastectomies. I don't want to have to wear a bra. You get glamorized into this idea of like, oh, this will fix everything wrong with you because you're figuring yourself out as like a maturing adult. Like,
right.
Again, I hate to break it to everyone, but being a teenager sucks.
To say, well, if it's 17-year-olds, okay, well,
In my state, that's actually
there's a
legal
nuanced
age.
conversation about even 17-year-olds, I guess, because the age of consent in some places is lower, but that's not what's happening, right? It's 12-year-olds.
When we talk about minors, it's like, what age range are we really talking about here?
Anyone
because
under
the
18.
because the thing is, when we talk about detransitioners or whatnot, all I hear is a lot of regret, right? Regret that they got these surgeries, regret of the complications, regret, and that's fine. I'm not taking away anybody's experience because these things do happen. But let's also remember, again, there is a process. Now, I have a lot of empathy for those detransitioners that have gone through the process and they are suffering.
But
I
it's
do
not
have
just
empathy for
detrans
that.
people. It's
But
not just
but that's
detrans
where
people.
that's where I'm just talking about in the conversation, for this particular conversation. And I understand what you're saying because you're absolutely right. There are more people.
Even
that are
among
doing
adults,
that.
we all
But-
do different things in
but-
our transition. Some of us
correct.
want bottoms, some of us don't, some of us want tops, some of us don't.
I
So
understand,
you
but-
need a lot of time as an adult to figure out what you want to do.
But see, the thing is, though, some adults don't even understand what they want to do. So, that's the
Exactly,
kind
so
of the
how can a
thing.
child?
But
I
see,
wanna-
children,
I wanna touch
wait a
on
minute,
one
let's
thing
not,
you said.
let's not underestimate.
To your point about the reason why I'm against it is because, like you said, the children need to go through the proper steps, the parents, the doctors, but in the state of California, if you, as a parent, tell your minor, no, you're not getting this, I'm not affirming your gender, I'm taking your kids away, and the California is going to raise your kids for you. So
Canada
how's
too.
that?
Canada too.
That's not right.
We also know that, like, all those safeguards that you're talking about, they're not happening.
Yeah, that's
They're
what I'm
not
saying.
happening at all.
California will
and we,
take your
and
kids.
we know because there was a whistleblower out of St. Louis, and this isn't some conservative whistleblower. She was married to a trans man, and she considers herself queer. So she blew the whistle and said that they had an in-house doctor. If you couldn't find a affirming therapist to sign off on the form, they would pencil whip it.
But do you believe that it should happen? Do you believe there should be a process?
It's about caring
It
about
is.
kids.
I'm talking. Oh my God.
It's
Get it
obsession.
together.
I have it together.
Yo, the obsession with the conservatives about other people's kids. If it is your child, it is your choice what you do with your kid.
Just to talk about someone who's at 16 and their level of consent.
Yeah. If it is your child, it is your concern what you do with your kid.
You know, the irony is palpable, because the fact of the matter is that a lot of the contention that's happening in this today and now about transgenderism and a lot of what's being even said in this Jubilee argument is because people like Alexander are feeling the need to go to talk to other people's kids about how they view the world. And so it's kind of interesting. Again, the projection. You're gonna condemn people about being concerned about kids that are not their kids, but I'm guessing that none of them have any fucking kids, now do they? But you're gonna profess your ideology onto those kids as to how they should view themselves and try to grow up as, and that you need to be the thing that they emulate themselves after. Because that's really ultimately what I see a lot of this is it's a lot of narcissism to the idea of, well, I need to see my life that I didn't get to have in these younger kids that aren't mine so that I can have a sense of self of, well, they got to experience the thing that I did. But there is still something to be said that if a parent that has a 12-year-old has no rights to even access their kids' medical coverage, and there's instances where medical providers are taking advantage of this wave of progression to extort suburban families to have surgeries and other intervention done at a young age, that is something to be said. Blair said, like, look, if it was just 17 or the age of consent in certain states, that's one thing, but we're talking about 12-year-olds.
You know, okay, I think a lot of this is just that, you know, I was talking earlier about the pendulum and how the pendulum always swings from conservative to liberal. And it's like when the LGBT movement started, there was a lot of things that people like myself who were not part of that community, but there was a lot that I could get by and stand behind, right? We should all have equal treatment. It doesn't matter what your gender is. It doesn't matter what your preferences are. We should all have equal treatment. I think what starts to upset people that are, in the middle, kind of like myself, is when you start wanting special treatment for things that, nobody else gets special treatment for. I'm all about you getting equal treatment. Well, like I said, I am all about teaching people that are teaching our children that people are different, teaching children about different genders. I'm not so much the sexuality, even with Pride. And I feel like it was different with early Pride too. When if I'm going to bring children, if the children are being encouraged to go to Pride, then I don't necessarily mind seeing that there are different types of people that live their lives different ways. But I think the sexuality, if you're expecting me to bring my children, need to be taken out of it. My children don't need to see, a 12-inch dong helicoptering in front of their face as the parade goes by.
That's a very valid point, Van. And I'm going to tell you right now, doing the Lodi Pride this last year, I really made it well known to all of my entertainers and everybody else coming through. Hey, we are making this a family-friendly event. Because there are queer people that have kids that want to come to this, and there are people that have queer kids that are younger that need to see that they have a place of acceptance within the community. Exactly. But I think that there's a huge, huge difference from my local farm community, Little Lodi, doing Pride versus the one in San Francisco that wants to act like a Folsom Street Fair.
Okay, Mr. AC Allen, that was a lot for tonight.
Yeah.
And we're only halfway through, my friend.
I know. Dear God, it's almost like this is a really deep dive of a discussion that needs a lot of attention. Oh, God.
Well, there's definitely a lot going on here. I think all of these are interesting topics, and they're things, like I said, as a person that doesn't have to deal with any of these things, it's easy for me when I need to go to the bathroom. I know exactly where I'm going. I don't have to stop and think about it at all.
Well, again, I feel what's great about what we're doing here today is we're discussing things from different viewpoints. Obviously, you have a much different background than myself. I definitely don't necessarily have a huge say in what it is to be trans outside of, again, did drag for like 10 years. At the same time, I really, again, want to impress that these are opinions that we have ourselves. It's not done in malicious intent. It's not done to hurt anybody. It's not done with anything other than trying to better understand one another. And, again, I'm not a very conservative person, but it is fascinating to see that the conservative side of the table rationally makes a bit more sense, or at least consistently does.
Don't let Blossom hear you say that. She might try to come here and start a fight with
you. As a trans black woman, you're wrong.
As a black trans woman.
But otherwise, this is unpopular opinion. You might not like it. I might not be popular, but hey, I'm used to that. I was picked on a lot as a kid.
Hey, we want to thank you for hanging out with us for our very first episode. We're going to get this thing nailed down. We're going to have lots of fun topics and things to talk about. And we hope you take this journey along with us. Once again, my name is Ark Excala of the Kyber Cave, and this is AC Allen, who is also known as Selderon. Is that it?
Sidorian! Damn it. Or Rubik's Q Arcana. The Q stands for Queen.
Yeah. All right, y'all. We will see you next week on episode 2. Oh, you know what? I forgot. I got to get that. I'm not even prepared. I'm supposed to have the outro ready to go.
Man.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Damn it. You're right. This isn't live. Okay. Well, then give me a moment. Where's the outro at? Right. All right. There are so many video clips.
Matt, so I love you. Have fun editing this thing down to like.
Oh, here we go. All All right, thank you, Mets. You are the best. You know, I'm if you can get this down to an hour, there's no way you're probably gonna do that. So, you know, cut it where it sounds appropriate. We love you.
This might get split up into a two-parter. We'll see. It'll be one for the first subject. Next
we'll
subject.
do 3 parts on this episode.
We'll just release per question every week, and then it'll be fine.
All right, Anthony. I'm gonna call it a night. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been a ton of fun, and
hard work.
Yes, this will be great as we go along, my friend.
For sure.
All right, take it easy.
Do the same.
Peace.